It's the Mike James Show, exclusively on 104.5 The Team.
They're all beginning to bear down on American Pharoah. Frosted is there in fourth, regains third by just ahead, midway on the far turn. American Pharoah through it all, still in front, opens back up here by 2.5, 3 lengths to the top of the stretch. FNX continues to give chase. Frosted third, Tonalist in fourth, a quarter mile from home, and American Pharoah is into the stretch at Keeneland in the Breeders' Cup Classic. A 5-length lead as he comes to the 8th pole. FNX second, Frosted far back in third, Tonalist is in fourth. Into the final furlong, there will be a 4th jewel in the crown. He's an everlasting credit to the sport. American Pharoah has belted a grand slam in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He wins it in 2 minutes flat.
Welcome into the Mike James Show. I am, of course, your host, Mike James, and I am being joined on the phone lines once again by the one and only voice of the great Keeneland Racecourse, Mr. Kurt Becker. Kurt, how are you today?
Mike, all is well. It's good to be with you once again.
I appreciate you taking on time because I know your schedule's not quite as, well, my schedule is not as hectic as yours is, but I know we're getting closer to Keeneland opening up in, 3 weeks from Friday?
That's true. One of the rites of spring and thoroughbred racing. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a beautiful time of year in central Kentucky, and of course, that means we're getting another step closer to the Triple Crown Trail as well.
What is it? You mean that's right around the corner?
Getting close, my friend.
So now, like I said, Keeneland does open 3 weeks from Friday, which the Bluegrass is what? Does that make that 4 weeks from Saturday, or is it opening Saturday?
It is actually opening Saturday now, but you know, your thinking is, of course, correct in the sense that for many years it was on the second weekend, but it will be on Saturday, April 7th, and still waiting to see how the field's going to come together for that race. Looks like the Ashland on the same day for the fillies ought to be an interesting race as well, as always.
And as I said to you via text message earlier, me being the degenerate that I am, of course, naturally, hey, I knew Keeneland opens up 3 weeks from this week, and I was like, wow, means we are really getting close to the Derby. Last week, we definitely had some interesting prep races for the Derby, the Tampa Bay Derby, which was an upset. I wouldn't say that Gotham was so much of an upset. I mean, that race was kind of, it didn't play out to what we expected, but it was still pretty good. It wasn't much of an upset.
That's true. Looking at those prep races, it's still pretty early, and I've not settled on a particular horse for the Derby just yet. But Enticed, you mentioned the Gotham. Enticed was a horse that caught my eye last year in his brief appearances as a 2-year-old. Anytime you've got the Godolphin, Karen McLaughlin connections as owner and trainer, that's something to pay attention to. McKenzie, I thought McKenzie, despite getting disqualified in the San Felipe, I thought he did some growing up. I thought Bolt Doro was going to run right past him, turning for home, and I thought McKenzie buckled down and showed that he got some fight in him, which I like to see.
It's funny you mentioned the San Felipe because that's where I was going to go next. What was your thoughts on that disqualification? I'll give you mine afterwards, but I want to hear what you thought.
I'm always reluctant to be critical of a decision made by the stewards. I've always said they don't comment on the job I do, and I try not to be critical of theirs. But by the same token, as a racing fan, you've always got an opinion. I will say this. I will defer to the fact that the stewards in Southern California, I'm sure, have their own guidelines that they apply to a situation like that, and I will admit I'm not immediately familiar with their protocol for a situation where there's a bumping incident, as we saw. I will say this, as a racing fan, I remember thinking when the inquiry sign went up, I thought, well, there's not going to be any issue. There won't be any placing. McKenzie will stay up as the winner. So I will admit I was surprised by the decision.
I agree. My biggest issue, and I agree with you on this, the fact that with the stewards too, not, trying to disagree with them being in a track, working on becoming a track announcer. I try not to, but in that particular situation, as a racing fan, throwing the whole track announcer, title away and just being a racing fan, I was a little disappointed. To me, it was a heck of a stretch duel. That's what you want to see. And to have it come down to that, I kind of disagree.
And that's true. As I feel the same way about it. I thought, that was to use a term that a buddy of mine in New England likes to use. That was a real slobber knocker, and I just hated to see it, as you said, to come down to a decision from the stewards' booth. But at least, it was a grade 2, not a grade 1, and both horses will get one more prep race to go yet. And I would maintain, I think Ed DeRosa of Brisnet had commented, he had asked on Twitter, if that incident happens on the first Saturday in May at Churchill, does it result in a disqualification? And I would say no, it does not. I would like to think in a race the caliber of the Derby, it would be a different situation as far as how the stewards might see it.
Now, I'm going to ask you this question, being a fellow track announcer. Well, obviously everybody knows you better than they know me, but how do I put it this way? Now, I know as a racing fan, and I'm kind of learning this as a track announcer also with the stewards, but to me, it just, I don't know if annoying is the right word, but the fact that we don't have, it's the inconsistency of calls we see around the country that bothers me the most.
I think that's something that I hear from horse players in my neck of the woods, and I actually live in central Illinois, and in fact, just had a conversation today. We've got a high school basketball coach and teacher in our area who's a big racing fan. He plays a lot of races from a lot of different jurisdictions, and I picked up on the fact, I think it was he expressed something similar to what you just said. It's I guess any time that you've got human beings involved making decisions with subjective matters, there's regrettably going to be some inconsistency in how stewards from jurisdiction to jurisdiction might see it, and even how the stewards themselves within the same booth might look at a situation. But it can be. I mean, it's one of those things that it's one of the many aspects that can make the game interesting, but yet it can also admittedly be disappointing at times.
Yeah, and I know there's been a few times, I've been in the booth and I've gone, okay, because obviously we have a better point of view than the spectators do, but I've seen things through the binoculars that's made me go, really? but obviously we can't say that, but.
I do recall Marty McGee many years ago. Marty, of course, who's been with Daily Racing Form for many years. When I was starting my pari-mutuel calling career in Chicago, I had a tendency when a disqualification took place and then the stewards would show the replay and ask me to narrate it for the public, I had a tendency to say on the PA, well, as you can see, right here is the infraction. And I remember Marty wrote an editorial in Daily Racing Form where he strongly advised that I do away with that language and just kind of leave it up to the public to make their own decision. And I agree.
I'm not going to mention names here, but, as when I was in Arizona last winter, I had a little bit of a disagreement with my head steward, I guess you could say, on how I did things in that aspect of, with the inquiries and everything. But me being a horse player, to me, if there was no disqualification, I don't really care to know that what was being looked at. You know what I mean?
That's I can understand that. One of my favorite stories involving a steward was many years ago, back in the 90s. I was calling at a track where the stewards were next door to me, and we could actually see each other through a glass partition. And they were trying to get my attention at some point, and I was distracted. I had somebody in the booth that was visiting with me, and at the end of the day, the head steward came over, and he pulled my door open, and he flipped the deadbolt back and forth a couple of times. He said, "I'll be darned, you can keep people out of your booth and focus on your work if you really want to." I had to laugh. He did it the humorous way, but one of my favorite personal exchanges with a steward.
That's actually pretty funny. It's I'll give you a funny story in North Dakota last year, which unfortunately I will not be back there this year. But I will proudly admit that I got one of my good friends who's about my age, or he's younger than me. I did get him his first job, so he's got my old job, so I'm glad for him. But
nice.
I've become really good friends with my old steward out there, and I still talk to him. And actually, I just texted him the other day, and like we have aspects where we'll be sitting there and he'll hear me screw up and he'll yell down at me, "What are you doing down there? Are you kidding me right now?" And we'll sit there and we chuckle back and forth. And, you know, it's always nice when you have that good rapport with your stewards.
It really is. And I had a chance several years ago to work a steeplechase event out near Charlotte, North Carolina, where the track announcer shared the same floor. It was like a 3-tiered pagoda-style open-air steward stand, and the announcer actually stood with the stewards. And those guys were fantastic. I really enjoyed that, and I think maybe we all gained a mutual respect for each other's job that day.
Definitely. All right, we'll get off the horse racing topic for a little while here. We talk about that enough, don't we?
True.
So I don't know. How much do you follow the NFL?
I'm a casual fan. I will usually start paying closer attention about the time the playoffs get underway, and I will admit that this time of year, once the Super Bowl is over, I don't follow it as closely. But then again, I do read newspapers, I do see online stories, and there may not be any action on the field right now, but it's been a pretty busy, interesting week, hasn't it?
That's for sure. I'm a little heartbroken right now that Kirk Cousins is going to Minnesota. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, that seems to be the story that's making a lot of headlines, and it's been interesting to read the analysts and the experts conjecture about how this will affect other situations for other quarterbacks as well. In fact, I've seen Baker Mayfield's name mentioned in the midst of all this, how Cousins going to Minnesota, the trickle-down effect, and how it might affect young Mr. Mayfield down the road. So it certainly seems to have a domino effect.
Should I mention to you that I wouldn't be sad if Mayfield happened to fall to number 6, the Jets?
Wouldn't exactly break your heart, would it?
No. It's safe to say that for sure. Being an Oklahoma fan and a Jets fan, I wouldn't complain.
There's the daily double for you right there.
Can I get 100-to-1 odds on that? Just kidding.
Nice.
If we could, I think we'd all make money because I think we'd all take that bet. I definitely think it's a safe bet that the Jets are probably going to look at Mayfield there. If the Broncos don't actually add 5, because even though they just got Case Keenum, I'm hearing John Elway was at his pro day today and he was not disappointed.
You know, it's always curious. I mean, as a casual observer of the NFL, I always find it interesting to see all of the shuffling and the chess game that goes on this time of year, just because it seems like everybody's got a different opinion on what they're looking for, and especially when it comes to quarterbacks. I've read stuff today about this GM might like this quality in a quarterback, a GM with another organization might like something else. So it's curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely interesting to see. There's a lot of talk about those top 6 picks going on right now. You know, whether somebody's going to trade up, they're going to trade down, et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely going to be interesting to see. I'm hoping the Jets, if they decide, you know what, Mayfield's here at 6, but, you know, I want them to take Baker. But if there's somebody better, like if somehow Minkah Fitzpatrick falls to 6, which I don't see him doing, I would not complain to see, you know, Minkah Fitzpatrick head to the Jets to play alongside Trumaine Johnson, who they just signed also.
And how about the Jets thing? I mean, are you a lifelong Jets fan, I assume?
Too long of a Jets fan anyways. I don't know about lifelong. The funny part was I was joking around in the office today. I said, you know, I'm going to make a career change. I'm giving up track announcing. I'm giving up radio. I'm giving up everything else. I'm going to become the general manager of the Jets because you know what? At least I know if I do a terrible job, I know my job's safe. I have not been happy with McCagnon and Idzik and Tannenbaum running that show.
One thing about the Jets, when I was a kid growing up in the Midwest, I was born in 1969, so I was really not old enough to understand or even remember Joe Namath, but I can recall that by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, and I would hear adults, my folks would get together with people on a Sunday afternoon and might turn on the TV and watch the NFL, and I can remember folks talking about Joe Namath. I was always frustrated. It always frustrated me to hear the adults rave about Joe Namath. And here I was, I think, I wasn't old enough to remember it or to understand it. But, the Jets, who knows? Heck, things might turn around eventually.
All right, so enough of the NFL, because that's all I've heard about all day long at work today. Ironically working at ESPN Radio, but so in case anybody's missed it, I hear the NCAA tournament has started. Is there some truth to that rumor?
I am hearing it. Might have even been a couple of games already played.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So let's dig into that a little bit. Was there a surprise, and I'll give you my surprise after you give me your surprise, a surprise team that made it that you thought there was no shot they were getting in?
Yeah, there were a couple that probably did surprise me. I think there might have been some teams that, despite double-digit losses, made it into the lineup, maybe based on the strength of the conference they were in. Maybe an Alabama at 19-15. That might be one that surprised me. Maybe Rhode Island making it in was a little bit of a surprise. I get the impression that the committee seems to be rewarding both power conferences and also trying to give a little more of a shot to at least two teams from some of the so-called mid-majors. But how about yourself? Any that surprised you?
You're going to laugh at this one, being I live in upstate New York, but Syracuse. I thought that was the biggest joke in NCAA history that they made this tournament. I mean, who did they possibly beat this year that even matters?
Yeah, that's one that I think a guy could definitely say was a bit of a head scratcher. No doubt. I don't envy the committee. That's a tough chore, but and especially in this day and age, it's such a competitive environment on top of everything else.
So, I don't know how much have you actually looked into the bracket yet?
I have.
All right. So, to me, who do you think is the most vulnerable number one seed out of Virginia, Xavier, Nova, and Kansas?
I'm going to say that the most vulnerable number one is Xavier.
Really?
The reason I say that is they do seem to rely a lot on getting to the foul line where they're very good. But I tell you, to me, the challenge for them, if the seeds hold, would be, I think Xavier gets to the Sweet 16, but I think Gonzaga is going to be a handful for them. In my bracket, I've got Gonzaga knocking Xavier out in the round of 16. Gonzaga seems to be a pretty disciplined kind of team. They seem smart defensively. They don't seem like a team that puts the opponent on the foul line a lot. I think Xavier makes it to the round of 16, but that's where they become the first number one to go down.
I could see that, definitely. I don't know. To me, I hate to say this, but I think it might be the number one overall seed, the Wahoos of Virginia. They don't have the easiest bracket. I mean, if they make it to the Sweet 16, they're going to get Kentucky. I mean, they could get Kentucky, which I'm actually surprised Kentucky's a 5 seed, to be honest with you. But if they have an off game, Creighton or Kansas State could beat them in the second round.
That is a dangerous scenario. Kansas State is a team that's given a pretty darn good account of itself in the Big 12 all season. Bruce Weber, their coach, used to be the coach of the Fighting Illini at Illinois, and of course Bruce, his recruiting maybe isn't the best, but he seems like a decent in-game strategy kind of coach. And you're right. I mean, Kentucky's very dangerous. I know that there's been some restlessness among the folks in Lexington with 10 losses in the regular season, but that is a team, Kentucky, that seems to be getting hot at just the right time. They were pretty devastating through the SEC tournament.
I guess you would know a little something about the restlessness in Lexington, huh?
Well, I always tell folks, whenever my friends and colleagues in that part of the country, if they ever complain or get a little down or depressed about the season, I always tell them, look, I grew up in a family full of University of Illinois basketball fans, so you're not going to get a lot of sympathy from me about having it down here.
Well, yeah, and if Virginia happens to make it through that second round, which to me they should, without a doubt, and if they do, and they end up playing Kentucky, and if they don't play Kentucky, they're going to have to take on DeAndre Ayton and those Wildcats of Arizona, who that kid's just out of his mind.
Yeah, that's true. And Arizona is one of those battle-tested programs that always seems to be competitive in postseason play. I've been impressed with Arizona in recent years because they seem to have a pretty good balance of an inside-outside game, and I just love that. I'm a traditionalist. I love seeing a team that's got balance, where you've got good play on the perimeter, but you've also got some good big guys down low that know how to post up and make some moves to the basket. So Arizona's definitely a team that you have to fear.
Now, let's move to the other side of the bracket here a little bit. Because that's technically the left side of the bracket, so we'll move to the right. Who in the East/Midwest, who do you think who are you most scared of that could blow up brackets?
I see those brackets as really going pretty much to form. Now, the only exception, I've got Butler as a 10 seed getting to the Sweet 16. I've got Florida as a 6 advancing to the Elite 8. Of course, both of those teams are in the East.
Yep.
And in the Midwest, I've got it pretty much shaping up to seed right down the line. Now, one thing that scares me with Kansas being the top seed in the Midwest, and that is loaded. I mean, you've got Duke as a 2, you've got Michigan State as a 3, and so on. One of the things that scares me about Kansas as the top seed, I didn't realize this till I read it online this afternoon, that they are one of the absolute worst teams when it comes to offensive rebounds in the country. Apparently, they give up a lot of offensive rebounds and don't collect many themselves. And in fact, they rank 300th in the nation, which shocked me.
Oh, God.
So who knows? But I do have Kansas coming out of there and going to the Final Four.
Oh, you're killing me. Kansas. Who do you got them beating in the Elite 8?
I have them beating Duke in the Elite 8.
Oh, now you're really killing me. Oh, Kurt, come on. Here's the funny part, and I'll tell you this. I'm a diehard Duke fan, and I will admit, I have them winning 2 of my brackets. I always do. It's the way I roll. But I did have Kansas beating them in one of my brackets, so I guess I won't argue with you too much there. Now, how much have you seen this Loyola Chicago team play at all?
I have not seen them, but from what I've read and from what I know about their roster, if I had to pick, if you asked me for my overall potential Cinderella upsetter in the tournament, I would give them the nod. I love the fact that they are now recruiting from Chicago. They're getting some kids out of the Chicago Public League, which is always among the best high school conferences in the country. And I think they're for real. They won the Missouri Valley, they won the regular season and the conference tournament, but in addition, they had that road win at Florida. And I think, on top of everything else, their chaplain is a 98-year-old nun. And when you've got a 98-year-old nun on your side, that can't hurt either.
Wow. That just blew me away. I was literally like, what? That's crazy. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. So, all right, so we broke down most of the bracket because we're not gonna sit here and go over all the matchups because like I said, I don't even care about all the matchups that much, but I just want to touch on the ones I thought were key. I definitely is it just me or is it absolutely crazy that Coach K and Tom Izzo, wow, why did I draw a blank on that? They always seem to find each other when it really matters the most. Is that not true?
They do, and I think back to that early season matchup, like the first week of the season between those teams, and my recollection is that Bagley for Duke had an eye injury and didn't play much that night, and
yep.
Duke still seems to be in complete control of that game against Michigan State. And I know a lot can change since then. I tend to be a Big Ten fan. Again, it's a product of where I was born and raised and where I still live. But I'm skeptical that any Big Ten team is going to make a big impact in this tournament. In fact, I don't have any Big Ten team getting as far as the Elite Eight. I have them all knocked out as of the conclusion of the round of 16.
All right, so let's move to the Final Four. Who do you have in your Final Four?
Nothing too earth-shattering here. I pretty much went with chalk. I've got on the left side of the bracket, I have an all-ACC showdown between Virginia and North Carolina, and then on the other side of the bracket, I've got a Villanova-Kansas matchup.
I agree with you there for the most part. I think I had Virginia making it to the Final Four. Definitely not Cincinnati, who I don't know how they're a 2 seed, but
yeah,
I definitely think North Carolina, no matter what, they're going to be tough out of that West bracket. They are the defending champs, unfortunately, and just watching them play Duke this year 3 times, their team is just downright scary. I mean, you got Joel Pinson, or not Joel, Theo Pinson, Joel Berry, I forget the other kids' names, but they're just stacked everywhere.
They are. They are just historically so tough. They've always seemed to have these guys that. Their guards, you can have somebody draped all over them on defense. It can be 30 feet out from the basket and in a clutch situation, just drain a three-pointer on you at a crucial time and that kind of thing. So Carolina is for real. I've actually got Carolina in the national title game against Kansas, but I've actually given the nod to Kansas to win it all.
Well, call me crazy on my one bracket. You're never gonna guess what my final game is.
Tell me what you got.
All right. For the 4th time, this might be unprecedented in NCAA history, the Duke Blue Devils and the North Carolina Tar Heels are gonna play in a season.
It absolutely is feasible. That absolutely could happen.
And I also, I have Arizona making it, Arizona playing Duke, Duke beating Arizona, I have Duke beating North Carolina, and then I had Kansas beating, I don't remember who else on my other bracket, but it's definitely going to be interesting the next couple of weeks.
It will, and it is so much fun. I mean, to me, that tournament, the NCAA Men's Division I basketball tournament, is one of the most enjoyable things going, and I don't follow college basketball as closely as I once did. There's just too many other things happening, but I always make time for the tournament and love that those first 2 days in particular.
All right, we're going to wrap this up here shortly. Yeah, so I think we hit everything I wanted to hit on, I believe. So, Kurt, I appreciate your time and hope all is well.
Mike, it's always a pleasure. Great to hear from you, and appreciate your having me on.
And I swear, one of these times I'm really going to make it down to that beloved Keeneland. And it's on my list of places I definitely want to go in the next 2 years.
Come and join us. We'd love to have you, and we'll give you the grand tour.
I don't think you guys can handle me down there. You don't know how crazy I am.
Well, I've learned there are some, and I say this with affection, there are some crazy folks in Kentucky in the sense of crazy fun. So come and join us. I think we'll have a good time.
All right, man, definitely. All right, Kurt, thank you for joining me here on the Mike James Show, and I will talk to you soon.
That sounds good, Mike. Stay in touch.